Hi, how's it going, guys? You like that Berserk video? Oh shit, man. Okay, so if you're not familiar with how I do things on this channel, whenever I get high dislikes, I tend to lean on a fuck up on my part because, like, audiences tend to react the same way in my experience, and whenever I see content creators get defensive over backlashes, 99% of the time I see something they're fucked up. And especially with video essays, there's only really two ways of looking at it. Either you were wrong, or you didn't argue well enough. Either way, you can do better. So I had a look. There's a variety of comments. Among them, the most main prominent ones seem to be under two groups. Those are trying to justify why Guts / the story is the way it is. Sometimes they seem to be talking directly about the show, and other times they seem to be talking about the manga. It's kind of unclear. And the other prominent section is pretty much people saying, I can't criticize anything until I've read the manga. Sometimes these two bleed into each other, but I'm going to ascertain from both these prominent comments that there were two fuck-ups in this video. One was a miscommunication about my feelings of the manga, and where my criticism was aimed, and the other was me failing to realize a good chunk of people actually liked episode 1, and that there was an engagement that I had never noticed. Alright, miscommunication first. Originally, these manga comments confused the crap out of me. I totally disagreed with them because the point of my video was skip episode 1 because it's a terrible hook. When you're trying to get someone into a show, it doesn't matter what happens in the manga 30 chapters down the line, a new viewer knows jack shit and they're going to make a judgment based on what they're given. It doesn't matter if there's some extra clarity or engagement down the line if they just drop the show at episode 1, you know? That's why I feel like I can talk about it without knowing the manga, because the crux of my argument wasn't about why Guts is like the way he is or anything like that. My argument is episode 2 works way better as getting people into a series than episode 1, which can turn people away. But I think I miscommunicated at some point and made people think I was talking about manga Guts and that him in his first arc was shitty. So let me just make that clear first. I have zero problems with Guts in the manga. I like Guts in the manga. The first arc with Future Guts, totally fine. The sensitivities he was lacking in the anime was my only real problem. But the idea I miscommunicated this also confused the shit out of me, because I mentioned like 3 times in that video about the manga being superior, and how episode 1 hurt the source material, and even though I know Guts is better in the manga, I have a hard time getting into the series now. I'm sure I was clear I was only talking about episode 1, but when I talked to a couple of people in the comments and mentioned that I liked manga Guts, they were very civil, and they were like, okay, cool, so like, what the fuck? Here's what I think happened. See, I think I was saying one thing about the episode while accidentally presenting an argument that sounds like it applies to the manga as well. It's kind of like how people say, it's just my opinion, and then start criticizing other people's opinions. The argument betrays the disclaimer. Both before and after I tackle my main criticism about Guts losing his sensitivities, I have a habit of calling him generic and edgy, brooding manly man, but those are all like superficial personality criticisms, and you could totally see manga Guts fulfilling those criteria as well. So I think people's interpretation was, okay, fair point on the sensitivities, because no one questioned that, but now you're claiming that all of these traits, like edgy and brooding, are bad, but manga Guts has those exact same qualities as well, so now you're hating on manga Guts. Now you're hating on manga Guts. When really what I was trying to say was that I was only calling him those things because he lost those sensitivities, not as well. Because this video in particular, I use these words very weirdly. Normally these are superficial traits that don't mean anything to me. An edgy or generic or brooding character to me is neither engaging nor disengaging. It's just kind of there, like with most character traits like peppy or obsessive. I mention this more in depth in my Lapis Mikasa video, and even make mention of characters like Zuko, who are indisputably angsty, but are good characters regardless. But for this video, because those words carry negative connotations, I decided to use it as an insult because what actually makes a character, the sensitivities and beliefs behind the personality, were taken away. And that's confusing and dumb, and the reason I did it is because the level of emotive one-liners and writing I put into a video is highly dependent on how easy I think it is to sell my argument. My most emotive and personal videos are generally the ones where I speak positively because I don't need to be careful about my word choices. So you know that video a while back where I said I was going to stay away from hard sells because I was trying to stabilize my income? Yeah, that's still on. I just genuinely did not think this video was going to be a problem. I know that's hard to believe, but seriously, I was just like, I hate this episode, my experience with other people has been similar, and there are some significant differences from the manga, which usually mean people are already on your side. So I was like, cool. Episode must be universally regarded as bad, or at least mediocre, and people just don't really talk about it yet. Alright, cool. Think of a clickable title. Boom. Oh dear God! And because I thought it was going to be fine is why I go on these tangent rants and have like little gags admitting I didn't do research and use these hard-hitting, like heavy emotional lines like "this isn't my guts." God only knows I wouldn't have pulled that if I knew this video was volatile. I would have been all careful business. Hell, I wouldn't have even done the video at all because I'm busy experimenting with algorithms and I don't want to have to manage my fucking PR in the process. But fucking here we are! In future, when I have two different stories that are very similar in nature, but I'm only criticizing one, I need to, consider that volatile and return to being careful with my word choice. Anyway, it was, I think, one of the more emotive tangent rants where I use my language a bit more liberally and cause a confusion. But no, I have no problems with Guts in the manga and no issue with his base personality. I just have a problem with how the show took out those elements of depth. Everything else I said is pointless, airy-fairy writing that shouldn't have been included. And while I definitely think you could define Guts as edgy, my normal definition is, I guess, sadism, cruelty, and too cool for school. It's just kind of a personality descriptor. It's neither really good or bad. I don't really subscribe to the normal use of edgy as criticism. I just decided that this time I was going to use it as an insult for a character who lost the actual part that makes a character, because I didn't anticipate how seriously I was supposed to be selling this argument for this video, and it just sounded good for the rant. Slight oversight on my part. Alright, cool. Next fuck up. A good chunk of the comments seem to be defending the actual episode, possibly? It might just all stem from the problem before, but a combination of comments on this video and on the first episode here on YouTube, as well as me changing the title from The Episode That Ruined Guts to The Worst Episode, and the dislike ratio getting worse as a result, and remembering that one time a friend did actually think this episode was alright, and debating one of my YouTube buddies who wanted to defend this episode, who wanted to defend this episode. It all leads me to the idea that maybe a chunk of people are just getting defensive because they like the first episode of Berserk, and I haven't acknowledged the element that does it for them. Instead, I'm just dismissing it all as terrible. Now, if you're familiar with how I do analysis, see what is good. If a large subsection of people like something I don't, then that's an indication of bias from me. I've never before seen something I'd regard as majority bias. I just think it's more likely that when there's a large group of people who naturally like something, there must be an engagement. So basically, if I can't see what that is, then generally it implies that I have another engagement bias that I haven't noticed. I did a lot of thinking, and I realized that I'm really bad at seeing spectacle. It's been in the back of my mind for a while now, but honestly, I think I've been a little averse to mentioning it because, it sounds like hipster bullshit elitism. Because for someone who's really bad at seeing it, I guess I go, oh, you just like pretty colors and big dudes swinging giant swords. But I think it's a bit more than that. In fact, I think I'd like to formally define it as entertainment through phone. Fucking run out of charge another time. Fuck, where was I? Shit, hang on. Okay, I'd like to formally define, spectacle as engagement through extremes. And that starts to fill in the gaps for me. It's not just simply action. Berserk episode 2 is like a normal couple of sword fights, but in episode 1 it's like giant sword this, cannon on this, half a body flying over your head there. I think that's where it's coming from, although I'm completely incapable of feeling that. But since the Undertale video, I've started to broaden my horizons a bit and get into Western media, and in doing that, I've ended up building a whole other list of things that my love for doesn't match the popularity. And you know what? This explains a whole bunch of them. For instance, Mad Max Fury Road. Really popular movie, but when I got out of it, I was just like, that was just one really long action scene. What was up with that? But that's about as far as my engagement goes. Every action scene to me is just an action scene. I notice it with good hand-to-hand choreography for some reason. I love Ruby, but that's about it. Even One Punch Man that I mentioned in the video, I didn't really like that much. It was okay, but I didn't get the hype. Marvel movies are another good example. There are some story elements, but they're mostly big, blockbustery Western action series that I don't really get. But I decided to finally get around to pushing myself through the Avengers after this video got a backlash and I felt like shit. And I thought more and more about it, and I concentrated really hard, and I started to notice that action is more than just choreography. It's like stuff flying everywhere, and there's lasers and shit, big face-offs, and 6 different characters and spinning shots, and I don't know, it's hard to describe, but the easiest way, I think, is it's extreme, which in itself there is definitely a fascination for. And it makes sense. It explains why I only like Infinity Wars and Guardians of the Galaxy because of stronger story and snappy one-liners respectively. It explains why sometimes, when I come out of a movie with friends and I start complaining about the story, one of my friends will say, "Why does it have to be about the story? Why can't it just be fun?" That's what people mean! And the Berserk equivalent is when I complain about how a random girl didn't work as a satisfying revenge plotline, and people call it nitpicking, because it's me trying to find the attempted engagement in a scene that already has a different engagement that I just haven't realized. It explains why I thought Phoenix Wright would adapt into a popular, clever-driven, story-driven anime with loads of popularity when it just didn't. Because it's all set in basically a boring courtroom with no spectacle. It works way better with the puzzle elements of a game. Being animated and taking the challenge element away really just adds nothing because it doesn't profit from the spectacle that animations provides. It explains why every time people make a big deal out of the big battles in Game of Thrones, I'm like, that's not what Game of Thrones is about. Why do they bother? But I can kind of see it now. Crazy shit is happening. It's chaos. There's horses and fights everywhere, and one horse slams into another horse. Like, I get it. I think I get it. And so that's why Lord of the Rings doesn't make sense to me. I always thought these long battles were tedious and pointless, but now, alright, spectacle. They're fucking huge. Hell, I thought the backlash to the video was actually kind of funny in a way, because Mother's Basement did a Goblin Slayer video recently, where the core is eerily similar to my video. I think in both cases you had a good chunk of the fanbase who genuinely enjoyed episode 1, and then you have some jackass critic coming in who didn't like it, saying that you shouldn't like it either and it has zero redeeming qualities. When he tries to explain the love with a combination of politics and emotional manipulation, people get pissed, because you're not properly weighting the engagement that causes them to actually like it. And that's the funny thing. I didn't really care for Goblin Slayer, except I guess the kind of clever strategy thing I liked. But I think the whole divide on Goblin Slayer might just be a divide in engagement alignments. People who don't align with spectacle might just be turning to politics to explain why people like it when they don't. Of course, I didn't even do that because I didn't even know people liked Berserk Episode 1. But I think in truth, the people who like it were responding to the extreme and ruthlessness. And not just the rape part, which for the record I don't give a shit about. I mean, bitch, I read Made in Abyss. I think I lost that moral ground. But whatever, I'm all up for artist expression no matter what it is. But what I mean is that, like, shit just fucking hits the fan. It's chaos, the stuff is happening everywhere, it has extremeness to it that you just wouldn't find in a normal drama no matter how deep the story is. I mean, just look at the way Mother's Basement talks about the Marvel movies. These huge, popular movies is just like, it's fun, I guess, but then he raves about Infinity War, the one with much stronger story elements. Back to Goblin Slayer, he gave one line to the actual engagement and called it like a fun, schlocky action, but like me, he kind of concentrates a bit too hard on strategy elements and then goes on to dismiss all forms of the extreme as an engagement, instead opting to consider a poor attempt at a revenge plot where you want to get the audience to, like, hate the antagonist, and oh look, that's exactly what I did with Berserk! Spectacle bias also explains out-of-entertainment concepts like sightseeing, where when I was a kid, and I went to tourist spots with my family, I was, like, totally dispassionate to it. I'm like, what's the big deal? It's a big open space, and there's mountains and shit. Even now, I don't leave the house much, and I have no passion for travel or nightclubs or going out to events. It all just seems kind of boring to me. I'd rather just play a game that challenges me, I guess. It explains power scaling, it explains gore, it explains High School of the Dead, and what some people refer to as the rule of cool. It explains Shadow of the Colossus bosses. Actually, I always thought they were cool, but I never acknowledged why. I guess the atmosphere made me feel like it was okay to like it, or something, I don't know. Oh, I originally put that one scene with the guy chucking the cross-continent spear from Seven Deadly Sins down to a character investing moment, but it makes so much more sense as a spectacle scene. And I actually felt that one, by the way. So this might be more towards the upper end, because if you watch my Undertale video, my experiences with biases have always been really inconsistent. Sometimes I notice, but most of the time I don't. When I do notice, though, it tends to be combined with another engagement. I know people gave me a lot of different arguments for why Episode 1 was good, but this one is the clearest and biggest difference from Episode 1 to 2, and forming it makes a sense of a whole bunch of other things, so I'm actually pretty content with this one for now. I guess we'll see what you guys think. This was supposed to be a PR video, but I instead hijacked it to form a new theory. I don't know if this one will go over perfectly, but I never do. At least it wasn't a total waste of time for me, I guess. Anyway, conclusion. Berserk Episode 1 is alright. I still don't think it does much with depth of character that made me love the Golden Age arc, and because of that, its engagements are balanced badly, so whether you start on Episode 1 or 2 is really up to whether you prefer spectacle or character depth. Again, Black Swordsman arc in the manga carries both of these things, and I have no problem with it. I wouldn't have made a complaint about a character or arc if I hadn't, read it completely. I just have a problem with just a single episode and its ability to hook compared to the next episode. That's it. Everything else was dumbass emotive writing that muddied the argument. Returning to episode 1, if they had added what they removed from the manga, it would have fixed the problem, but it's not terrible. That was definitely going too far, and it still has merits that the old Golden Age arc doesn't, save for 1 or 2 episodes. Alright, I think we're done. So long. Hopefully this goes well. Bye.